friends, Lori here. I'm here today for day 7 of BookMas. We are going to talk about the authors in 2021 that I found. That this means that they're not debuts. They didn't have their first book come out this year, but it was the first book I've read by them, and they made such an impression, and that is why they made this list. The first book I'm going to chat about in this video is one that has been on my TBR for so long, especially since I've been watching Haley in Bookland, and that is The Girl in the Blue Coat by Hessi. Here is a photo. This is a historical fiction read, and it has like a murder mystery element to it. And I really have been trying to read more historical fiction. I've been reading a lot of Regency romances this year, but this book was a nice balance between historical fiction, but also like a romantic element to it, somewhat, but also like dealing with my favorite type of historical fiction, the smaller stories. The smaller stories in reference to war and times like that. I don't like big battle stories. I like smaller stories, and this one had a revolution element. I was really intrigued by this one. I didn't want to put the book down. I wanted to know what was going to happen. It was a very fast-paced read, and one that I felt super connected to the characters. It was one that I just really liked. I definitely want to read more by Hessi in the future. I have a couple of books by her on my TBR immediately. This one just really stood out to me, and I was so happy that I finally picked it up. So that is why she made this list. The author that I am going to give a shout out to is L.T. Ryan, who wrote Path of Bones. I know Karen a little bit through the interwebs. She's one of my favorite podcast hosts that I listened to for years. She's on Rewatchable, and she was on Book Hype, and now she's on Prophecy Radio, and she started writing her own cozy murder mystery book series, and I just had to give her a shout out because I've read at this point 2 of her books, and I've really enjoyed both of them. But here is a photo of Path of Bones, her first book. This is a nice balance between like a cozy mystery with a paranormal twist. I know this character came from another author's like books that she was like gifted to write about, and it really works for me. I sometimes struggle with cozy mysteries, like the Hannah Swanson series. This book is super short or not like that long, but packs quite a punch. It has like a supernatural element because she can like talk and see to ghosts. She's sort of a medium. She uses those powers to help her solve cases. And I'm really intrigued. I really like it. I think she has a fast-paced writing style. She has a nice balance between the eerie and the creepy, but the cozy elements that I like. I'm actually in the middle of reading the 3rd book now. I've been a little bit distracted with everything going on, but I'm liking it so far. It's definitely a little bit harder topic that they're dealing with, but I'm really intrigued. I'm really liking it. I like her writing style quite a bit. I like her characters. You could really tell she as a writer has an art history background because that's what the main character does. I'm quite fond of it, and I'm really hopeful that she keeps writing, or maybe she writes something new, because I really do like her as an author, and that is why she made this list. That is a cozy mystery, but it's published by Berkeley, which is a little bit more prevalent, but it's Jessie Q. Sawento, and this is her adult debut. There's a couple of YA books out that I've not checked out quite yet, but it's Dial A for Aunties, and of course this book had to make this list because it was an absolute delight. Another like cozy mystery, and I've really grown to love these, but this is one that was just fun. It follows this girl, and she works with her aunts and her mom at like a wedding. They run their own wedding business, and she winds up accidentally, inadvertently killing one of her dates, and they have to get rid of the body. They have to hide the body, and the body winds up going to a wedding, and they have to sort of solve this murder and try to get rid of this body, but also a blast from the pants romance sweeps her off her feet, and I devoured this book. I thought it was so cute. They're coming out with a sequel in 2022. Definitely gonna get my hands on it. It was super fun. I really liked it. I thought it was, again, I've been reading some cozy mysteries that have really surprised me recently, and I've really enjoyed the Hannah Swanson series, but as I've said, the mysteries and the character development in those is a little bit weak for my liking. This book was the opposite. I love both the mystery and the character elements, just because like Arsenic and Adobo that I talked about in my previous video, they really just expanded on an experience, and I like that, and I thought it was really fast-paced and really, really cool. So definitely a book to check out for your consideration, and one that definitely has made of the list of authors that I'm going to keep an eye out for in the future. Chat about is the Heartstoppers trilogy, because I've read all 3 books this year. Book 4 is fastly approaching a release date in the US, so I'm really excited, but I have to talk about Alice Oseman. I'm talking about Heartstopper since I feel like the pandemic, and I had a free copy from Scholastic because I got an ARC from when I went to ALA. I read the first 2 and I really, really loved them. I thought that it was not only a fun graphic novel, but also dealing with harder topics like, you know, coming out, being bisexual, just dealing with harder stuff. And I really liked both Charlie and Nick a lot. They both had very, very different issues, and it just was a really fun story. I really liked how the story was so inclusive, and it just put a smile on my face. I really want volume 4, so I'm gonna have to add that to either my holiday list or maybe just buy it for myself. It has to whenever it comes out. That might actually be, if I find it in the airport, that might actually be the book I pick up. But I love this. I really want to read more by Alice Oseman. I know people are a big fan of her novels. I really loved her graphic novels, but I might have to pick up some other of her books just to see if my love translates to her novels. But I have really, really loved Heartstopper and can't wait for volume 4, and definitely think you should pick it out. Another LGBTQ plus project that I just really loved, and I just devoured the characters. Nick and Charlie are definitely some of my new favorites. With most of the romance authors, Regency romance authors that I pick up, they've been out for decades. Not decades, but a really, really long time. So most of those will pop up on this list because they're new to me, and I've been reading a lot more Regency romance, especially in the audiobook department this year. So the first author I'm going to chat about is Joanne Schwoop, and here is a photo. This Regency romance that I read set in New York City, and the premise of this one reminded me a lot of the premise of Pride and Premeditation, so I'm going to try really hard not to get them mixed up because they're super similar. But you find out this main character, her dad is a lawyer, her dad works for a lawyer, and she gets wrapped up in this mystery of a husband murdering someone, or like a wife murdering someone, and she doesn't think the wife did it. So she is convinced that she is going to protect this woman and make sure that she doesn't get sent to death, and she winds up working with her dad's coworker as a real lawyer, and they wind up trying to solve this case. It was really, really fun. I really, really liked it. I've never read a Regency romance set in New York City before. I've read historical fiction set in New York City, but this one was just really, really fun. Most of the Regency romance I've read most of them are put in England. Some of them are in Scotland, but most of them are in England. I really, really like this. I thought her writing style was really, really sweet as well. I liked it. I want to read a couple of her other series. This one I would like to finish as well because it follows 3 sisters. I love sisters, stories about siblings. But I liked it. It was a different take on a Regency romance. I liked the go-getting woman who had a career that she really, really wanted but felt like she was being held back. A little bit like Pride and Premeditation, which I talked about yesterday. But yeah, overall, really liked it and definitely want to read more books by this author in the future. Regency romance that I'm going to chat about is The Footman and I think it's by Valerie Bowman, and this is another rec from Peace Love Books, and here is a photo. 2 of these books in this series, and they both have been super delightful. But it basically follows these group of best friends, and they feel like they're not finding the wives that they want because upper crust society is very, very height nose in the air, and they're very, very focused on money. So these men decide to take the roles of servants at this house party and try to find women that they think are not that way, and women that they think will respect them and like them for themselves and not for their money. The first book is definitely my favorite. You follow this guy, and he's pretending to be a footman, but he's really an earl, and it is just so funny seeing him trying to be a footman, and then the girls. You get both point of views, which is my highlight when I read Regency romances, and I just loved this main character so much. Sometimes when I read Regency romance, the male leads don't do it for me. They're very, very possessive, very, very extreme. This one was just so sweet, and so he's just a nice character. He's definitely my type of hero, which I have a hard time finding in Regency romances. But I really, really liked it quite a bit, so that's why it's made this list. And I definitely want to read the second two books in the series, because I think the last one, like, I'm really excited for. It's the story of the Clayton who's already married when the series starts, and I really, really want to get their love stories up. But definitely a fun read, and definitely one that I'm happy that I picked up. What I'm going to chat about is Kelly Yang, and I read Front Desk by her. So here's a photo of it. I gave it to one of my students who really, really likes to read. I love this book. Again, it was a book that I went in not really expecting to love it, but I really, really did. I think it might go on my one of my top contemporary reads of the year, because it just talked about so many things. It was set in the 90s. I believe this one was set in the 90s, but it basically follows this girl and her parents, and they wind up taking over this hotel from this man who's sort of a little bit of a jerk, we'll be honest. He's not the nicest person I've ever met in my entire life. But they wind up taking over this hotel, and they wind up, she really wants to be a writer, but her mom's trying to convince her she's never going to be a writer because she struggles with, like, English is not what they're good at, because they're immigrants, and immigrants don't write the best. Her parents hide immigrants in her hotel to protect them. And it's a really, really sweet story about finding your own place. She also just moved to California, so they're sort of dealing with a lot of stuff like that. I thought this book was so delightful. I really, really liked it. I fled through it. It was a quick read I read right before school started. I read it from one of my 24-hour reading vlogs. I really, really liked it, and it put a smile on my face. It was really heartfelt and just really looked at the immigrant experience in a very, like, eye-opening manner, and I just really liked it. There's two more books in this series. I know she has written some YA books that I'm hoping to get my hands on, but this book and the characters just put a smile on my face, and that's why it's on this list. What about is This Poison Heart by Caitlin Barron. This is actually her second book that came out. I do own her first book. I just haven't got around to reading it, but I love this book as well. Like a Secret Garden retelling. From when I read it, I really liked it, but it basically follows this girl. She lives in New York City with her two moms. They run a flower shop. Their flower shop is a little bit on the downswing, and they might have to move, but when she gets a letter from the birth family that gave her up for adoption, saying that she's been gifted at this mansion up in upstate New York, she goes there, and she winds up, and she does have powers. She has powers that she's sort of connected to nature, and she can make nature appear. She's never really understood her powers, so when she goes to this mansion, she starts to realize that maybe her gift is connected to her past, and she's sort of uncovering all of these mysteries. It was great. I really, really liked this one. I read it pretty early. I got an e-arc of it relatively early in the year. I really, really liked this one. I just loved, again, it was another book that had a nice balance between paranormal elements, but also contemporary modern issues in a book together. Like, reminded me a lot of Amari and the Night Brothers or Wings of Ebony. There was a nice balance between that, and I really, really liked that. I thought that was a nice way of dealing with these topics, but also having the supernatural element. There's also the beginnings of an LGBTQ plus romance, and it just was really well crafted, and I'm really excited for the sequel. I want to also go back and read Cinderella is Dead. But overall, very, very fun book, and so happy that I found her this year. The next book I'm going to talk about is the only adult book to make this list. Again, I've been really struggling with adult reads this year, probably for the past 2 years, but I just had to talk about Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. The first book in a trilogy, I think, and it follows this main character named Santia. She's a thief, but she has a little bit of some powers. Whenever she touches an object, she can not only feel where it came from and can sort of see, like, its identity and its, where it was built and stuff like that. She can also see cracks in it, so she can sort of see, like, if she puts her hand on a wall, she could sort of see, like, where is a place that she could break in. When she's tasked to steal an object that she doesn't necessarily understand, things get a little bit dicey. You follow the story through a bunch of different perspectives. There's a lot of elements in the story that I think would be good for new fantasy readers, because it had a lot of elements that reminded me of, like, Percy Jackson or The Mortal Instruments, but definitely for an adult audience. I really like this book. It was the first fantasy book that I've read in a while that sort of, like, captured my attention and I did not want to put down. I was really interested not only in the characters but also in the plot. I have the second book on my TBR. Again, it's one that I'm actively trying to get my hands on. But yeah, I just had to mention it because it was the first adult book I've read this year that really was like, wow, that's a good book, and I need to read the sequel. So that's why it's on this list. What I'm going to chat about in this video is Born Wicked by Jessica Spotswood. Here's a photo. How many TBRs this book has been on, how many fall TBRs I've had. I finally got around to reading it. And I really enjoyed it. I don't think it was necessarily what I expected, as I found what a couple of books definitely might make my most surprising reads of the year. I really like this book. I thought it was a nice balance between a Regency romance with a witch twist. It was like a nice balance. The romance was not what I was expecting, but like I loved it. Very focused on sister dynamics. It was a great read, really, really quick. Reminded me a little bit of The Witch Haven with just a little bit more Regency stuff tossed in and a lot more witchcraft, but I really, really liked it. So you basically follow these three sisters. Came out so many years ago, and they all have magic, and magic is like not allowed in this society. You're actually punished and murdered. But these three sisters have magical powers, and you basically follow the older sister. She's trying to navigate that and basically find a match to be courted, and some secrets come to light. It was great. I really want to get my hands on the second one. I think I might have an ebook of it, so I have to look at my ebooks and see what I actually have. But really, really fun. So let me know in the comments what are some new to you authors that you read in 2021 that you really liked, and I'll talk to you guys for my next video. Bye, friends.